Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Geeks Love Lists. My name is Brendan Lotz, and joining me in, I guess we could call it a tundra because it's sort of like a desert because there's no water in Johannesburg at the moment. Joining me is Louis Monzon.
There's no water, but there is me, and I am here.
And Robin Lichetti.
Only the cold embrace of winter in Joburg at the moment.
Yeah, and no water. Oof, what a terrible time to be in Johannesburg. Hopefully you are away on holiday because schools are closed. So hopefully you're away and escaping the water outages caused by maintenance.
And you're listening to us in your car or in your nice getaway location somewhere on a phone or whatever.
Yeah, in the sun.
That's good. Do that.
Yeah. So this month at Hypertext has been Artificial Intelligence Month. You may have noticed a lot of content revolving around AI in a whole bunch of different aspects, from on-device AI to how businesses are using it, to cybercrime, and a whole lot more. And we recently ran an AI in business survey where we asked you, our readers, or I suppose listeners in this case, how you are using AI, how the business that you work in is using AI. And Robin, do you want to tell us a bit more about the survey?
The survey itself, I guess the intent behind it was just to kind of gauge what our listeners or readers are interested in as regards AI in the business landscape. I think we often get inundated with reports around IT decision makers and what kind of their thoughts around AI. But we wanted to kind of get, I guess, the Joe Sixpacks of the world, their kind of ideas around AI, how their businesses are actually implementing it, or what steps they are taking themselves as far as AI within the business context is concerned. So set up a very simple Google form for our readers to log into and kind of share their feedback. We kind of broke down a few different metrics. This was over a period of 6 weeks that we ran the survey. And we looked at things like the respondents identified what industry they're a part of. I should mention that all the data has been anonymized, so there's nothing to worry about from a data privacy perspective. But we also kind of wanted to gauge what their general perception around AI was based on how it's represented in the media. We also wanted to find out things like whether or not their businesses have begun investing in AI-related technologies or solutions, whether or not workers themselves have been looking to upskill themselves, and then also kind of what the longer-term thoughts around AI are going to be. Will it be this really disruptive force, or is it kind of the new metaverse or the new hot trend within business that technology companies are obsessed with for a very short amount of time and then move on to the next thing? So it was, I guess, a bit more focused around what the general consumer / worker is thinking about when it comes to AI. And yeah, that's kind of the real methodology. And there were some interesting outcomes or some just interesting results from the survey itself, and we'll be unpacking a few of those during the course of the podcast.
Yeah, so I think let's kick off with that right away. So I think what I found most interesting was that the majority of respondents, 68%, were mostly positive about artificial intelligence based on how it's represented in the media. And I find that interesting because a lot of what I see in terms of AI coverage, or at least over the last year, has been about how it's going to replace jobs and kind of just replace people, So it was interesting to see that the narrative has sort of shifted, and we're now in a space where people are bullish about AI. I don't know what everybody else thinks about that.
It could be that the narrative has shifted, or that there's multiple narratives at the same time, which is also possible. Also, you have to look at like your personal situation around AI. We write about AI almost every day. We're writing something about AI or something related to AI. We have a more I don't want to use like gaming terms like hardcore and casual, but we have a more hardcore look on AI than someone who's reading it casually, through a more or less tech-based news source. Those a more general news source would have AI content that might be influenced in a certain way, and it might be that's why it's more positive, depending on how it's represented on the media, to the respondents. But other than that, I think you have to also think about the way that companies kind of issue or kind of talk about AI. Almost all companies that are doing something with AI are spinning it in a positive way. Obviously, because it makes a lot of money. Especially the way the generative AI that's come out recently, and that could be why the more mainstream publications are picking up certain things here and there, and the kind of the loudest voices are positive about AI.
Yeah, I also think that tools like Midjourney and like I think it's Sora from OpenAI, the video generator, like I think a lot of that gets some positive traction because it's like, oh wow, I can make a really cool piece of art for my desktop or an invitation or a party or whatever, or for my website in like a couple of minutes. And I think that's a skill that like a lot of people didn't really have access to unless you like learned how to use Photoshop or have like a Wacom tablet or you have some sort of artistic ability. Like I can't draw at all. So like something that can draw something for me is kind of tempting. So I think like that can also play a role in people having
Yeah.
a positive outlook at
Yeah.
artificial intelligence. I just
And
also
I
Sorry, I just also want to
so
mention
yeah.
that in that same question, 24.2%, so nearly a quarter of the respondents were neutral. So they weren't negative or positive about it. Just wanted to mention that.
They just kind of it's there.
Yeah.
It's there. It's
Yeah.
doing things. It's whatever. It's interesting that the lowest amount is mostly negative. Yeah, that's definitely something worth noting. But I also don't want to harp too much on this one, and I want to move on to the other one. But I want to say, like, I think it's also a more casual mindset. I can like anecdotally, like my parents, they love ChatGPT, and they
Yeah.
think it's like the coolest thing ever. Oh yeah, I used it to write a letter the other day, and it was so easy and stuff. And like you said, that's probably why. That's probably where from a lot of these people are getting this positive sentiment from, because they see these things as tools that they can use.
Yeah. Robin, how do you see this question from your point of view and the perception?
Like yourself, I was quite surprised by the answers. I think when you kind of look at the representation of AI from a pop culture perspective, AI was seen as something that was very scary, potentially could be abused in the wrong hands. But I do think that the public availability of ChatGPT kind of really changed things. To kind of make the tool widely available and kind of give people all of that creative control was really smart on OpenAI's part, because I think if you had all of these tools kind of behind a paywall or behind some kind of subscription service early on, I think there would have been a lot more hesitancy around the actual technology itself. That being said, I think being a part of the media, for lack of a better phrase, I think perhaps my view of it is quite cynical or quite critical, purely for the fact that I think AI raises far more questions than it does necessarily answers. But I do understand the sentiment around how exciting their technology is, kind of the capabilities it's able to give users. So I do understand some of the kind of mostly positive response, but at the same time, I did find it quite surprising, considering, at least from my perspective, that the coverage around AI or generative AI has been a little more negative than it has been positive.
So I want to move on to the next question, which was, do you believe that current detection tools can adequately tell between AI and human-made content? And 62% of respondents said that yes, they do believe that current detection tools can adequately tell between AI and human-made content. And I think that once again just represents the difference between the person who's perhaps not keeping up with this all the time and folks like us who are basically immersed in this 24/7. Um, like I remember covering OpenAI saying how it detects fraudulent use of its technology, and it's getting better at it. But even it admits that there's shortfalls, and it only really works when it's trying to when it's policing its own content, really. And I don't think, or just this week actually, TechCrunch reported that Meta's AI was incorrectly labeling real photographs, like taken by photographers, as AI generated. So I think there's sort of a misunderstanding of what these detection tools are capable of. Like I know that there's a number of tools that claim that they can detect that content is written by AI, but even those are hit and miss. I remember last year there was some furor kicked up about maybe ChatGPT was used to write parts of Cyril Ramaphosa's speech.
Yeah.
And it turned out that once you put the whole text into the detector that the person was using, it came out as negative. So it really depends on what detection tool you're using. And unfortunately, a lot of ne'er-do-wells have popped up that are leveraging this and saying, oh, well, we can detect whether this is AI or not. I mean, being around this stuff as often as I am, I still find it difficult to see when something is written by AI. How do you guys feel about the current state of detection tools?
On my side, this is also surprising. And one of the first things that I kind of when I looked at the results of the survey, I was like, what? As far as I know, and like what you said, Brendan, as far as I know, there's no single foolproof AI detection tool out there. With the thing with Ramaphosa's speech, if you put paragraphs by themselves, it said that this is clearly written by whatever tool they was used at the time, because there's so many out there. You can Google them, AI detection tool, and there's like 18, 19, 20 in the first page of Google. If you put the paragraphs, each paragraph by itself, it said this is like 99% sure this is clearly AI. But if you put the whole speech, like you said, it says no, this is human written. Is much higher chance of being human written. So then you ask yourself, why is that? How is that happening? And the other thing is, a lot of these tools they don't say what methodology they use to kind of detect whether it's AI or not. A lot of the times, I imagine they use very simple methods. And honestly, if and we're talking about AI detection in images. The only thing that I think is foolproof is that when the image creators themselves or the image software that actually puts out these images is that which is what Meta is doing, or no, sorry, not Meta, Google is doing with the Gemini and stuff, is that it inputs a digital watermark in the actual code of the image in the and that's the only way that software can pick up that is actually AI. When it comes to text, that this process gets even worse and even like muddier, because a person who actually knows how to use ChatGPT and knows how to write can just use ChatGPT to write long passages of text and then like edit certain portions. They still be saving time, but then no editing software can really pick up whether it's human made or AI made. And I think that's the problem, because there really is no way to kind of foolproof detect whether something is made by a human or made by an AI.
Yeah, Robin.
Yeah, I tend to agree with Louis that there aren't actually adequate detection tools. Uh, I point to that example that you mentioned around AI generated images. And I wouldn't be surprised if the algorithm that is being used by the detection tool is looking at how edited an image is. So, if, for example, there's a lot of color correction or using some kind of Photoshop tool just to make slight edits to the image, it's probably picking that up and then flagging it as an AI created image. So, I think, yeah, the tools themselves aren't adequate. When it comes to text, I think that I personally believe it's a little bit easier to detect. I don't think you need detection tools. You can often tell if something has been written by some kind of AI generation platform, especially if you know the style of the writer or the style of the content. I feel we often joke in the office around when we do see AI generated text, that it seems like someone that's just gone to university and just whipped out the thesaurus and is just adding words and perambulating on the outskirts of veracity and all those good things. Yeah, so I think to your question, the tools aren't adequate enough, and I think that line will slowly start being blurred as over time as to whether people were able to detect if it's AI generated or human.
Yeah, I think this question also comes down to the current state of AI on a consumer level, right? So if we look at like things like images that are generated by like Midjourney or what's his name, Dale. If we look at those images, there's often telltale signs, right? So if you look at like the hands, although that is getting better, but things like window frames or there are some oddities in AI generated images that you can spot if you know what you're looking for. And I think that that's also what fueled a lot of people to say yes, the current detection tools are pretty good. But what I think we need to also consider is how quickly this technology is getting better. Like the fact that OpenAI has Sonar, which is the video generation thing, like that's getting really good really quickly. The fact that it can now generate video that looks somewhat believable, um, as an initial release that's impressive, and it's only going to get better as more investment comes into the sector. So I think that detection tools are kind of something that needs to be thought about a lot more seriously, especially because malicious people are going to use these tools. They are already using these tools. We have like deepfake issues. There are like teenage girls in the US who are being extorted by people who are using AI generated deepfakes of them and like sexually explicit material. So like this needs to be dealt with really really quickly, and bad actors are already using these tools. So yeah, the detection needs to get better. Absolutely, it needs to get better, and I don't think that they are sufficient from where I'm sitting. Right. Let's go to in the business stuff. So how AI is being used in business from a sort of employee's point of view. So we asked our readers, has your business begun investing in AI? And then more importantly, do you or your company pay for access to any AI services at this time? So the majority of people said that their businesses have begun investing in AI related technologies or solutions, 54.8%. It's a rather even split there, I will admit. So it's sort of like 50-50 if we round up and round down. And then when it comes to paying for access, though, the majority of people say no, so 54.8%. And that right there is very concerning. Because if you're using a chat GPT, for instance, the data that you're putting in there could be being used to be training chat GPT further. And if you're dealing with sensitive information, that could land you in legal trouble if that information gets spat out by chat GPT in some other conversation further down the line. I'm curious to know what you guys think about this. Robin, maybe you can give us your thoughts.
I think that question, or rather the results from that question, might also be tinged with the fact that we're asking South Africans this.
True.
South Africans are loath to pay for things when they don't have to. But I think to your point, there is potential there for sensitive data to be plugged into any of these platforms and potentially regurgitated elsewhere on the internet. So I think that is a concern. Not right now. I think companies are still kind of grappling with what they actually want to do with AI and where they want to implement it within their business. But I think it'll take, just for example, like with Poppy, it'll take that first case to kind of come out where something bad has happened as a result of plugging in sensitive data before actually companies take up sit up and take notice of what's going on there. But I think when it comes to payments, yes, South Africans in general, we don't like to pay for stuff.
Fair point. Louis?
So it's interesting that most, or a small majority, said that their businesses have begun investing in AI-related technology. And this could really be a number of things, automation, things like that, machine learning, anything like that. We also, worth noting that we have quite a nice breakdown of businesses, the industries that the respondents have indicated they're working with. The majority in a small, well, the majority said other, so that could be a number of things. But other than that, the second largest amount was retail. Followed by education. And they say that the businesses are or the companies they work for are invested in investing in AI related technologies in some way. It's the thing is, South Africa is still very early on in the whole in AI adoption. Like it's not like we're not like Singapore or countries like that, very tech and digital intensive. So it's interesting that something is being done in this space. But yeah, they're not. The companies are not paying for this. So they're looking at things, but they're not paying for them. Maybe we. I don't want to be contrarian or cynical, but the fact that most said that they're not paying for it, and also most said that they're looking into it, gives me the feeling that in fact what the businesses are really looking into or investing in quotation marks is maybe telling people maybe we can use Copilot, or maybe we can use ChatGPT, or maybe we can use Gemini. Maybe they're looking at the very surface level things.
Using Copilot to fix your email.
Things like
remove typos and that sort of stuff,
or summarize certain things, or just the very surface level. They're not looking at Salesforce level, complete CRM that changes everything your business does and puts generative AI everywhere. They're not I doubt that this is what they're really talking about here when they say they're investing in this technology, because they're not paying for it. A portion say they are paying for it. So and that could be what a larger every company now that does some sort of software as a service, it feels like they have to do an AI related thing. And that could be what we're seeing here with the people who say yes, that the companies are paying for it. So that could be what the situation around these 2 points. It's still the kind of the difference between the people who are whose companies are paying for it and people who's not, and likewise for investing in the technology is very small. So I think it's still, I get the feeling that it's still kind of a new space, people are still like I think Robin said, they're still trying to decide what to do with the technology, still trying to understand what we should do with it. There's AI, should we invest in it, should we not invest in it, can we look into it? It feels like it's more than anything, it's just conversations that are happening around the technology.
So I want to break off here a little bit and just kind of go on a bit of a tangent. And I want to ask the question of whether there is a broader misunderstanding of what AI is. So when we talk about AI, we're talking about large language models or generative AI, which is leveraging large language models to generate responses. So with a ChatGPT, that's drawing from a corpus of data that's been trained on and context and all this sort of stuff. And you ask it a question and it's able to generate a somewhat believable human sounding response, right?
Right.
Or if you plug in a series of words into Midjourney or DALL-E or Udio or one of these other generative technologies, it's able to take those keywords and then say, right, well, here's what something like this would look like or sound like, and here's something for you. It's not creating anything really. It's kind of just being inspired by a whole bunch of different material that it's been trained on. But I think that the term AI has become a catch-all for a whole bunch of different things. And I just want to find out if I'm alone in that weirdo thinking.
I can go first.
Alone, at least from my perspective.
Robin goes. Sorry.
Sorry about that. So I've kind of grappled with this issue for some time now. The use of the word AI. am fortunate enough to attend a lot of roundtables and media discussions around AI and how it's been implemented, but I still struggle with the industry in general using the term AI. If I take, for example, someone like Samsung, which at the beginning of the year launched S24 series and its kind of new suite of software called Galaxy AI. If I look at all of the features within Galaxy AI, those are kind of machine learning based features or features that have been a part of kind of Google's suite of software for some time. There's a circle to search feature, for example, that is simply an extension of Google Lens, which has existed for a very long time. I would argue close to a decade now.
Yeah.
So I do have a problem with the marketing and the terminology around AI. I think, like you said, it is overused. It is there's that there's a great kind of episode in Silicon Valley when they're talking about VR. If something is VR, then you're definitely going to get or augmented reality. If your product has augmented reality somewhere in it, you will definitely get seed funding from venture capitalists.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of companies are doing that now, that we have to have AI featuring somewhere. We don't necessarily know what it's going to do. We don't know if it's going to be useful, but just make sure it has AI branding somewhere. So I definitely have a problem with that, I think. And to my mind, at least, AI is something that is several steps beyond what is currently being developed now.
Yeah.
To me, this is simply just text-based content generation. That's kind of my views on it.
Well put, Louis.
Yeah, just to go off with the last thing that Robin said, it's generative AI is not even, it's like the newest way we understand AI, but it's not even like what the original understanding of AI was, which by the way itself, artificial intelligence, they've linked it back to like a marketing phrase initially, like it was a marketing thing, and it's actually based on a long series of different kind of things that all kind of form around the same idea that a computer can think like a person, right?
Yeah.
But even with generative AI, it's not really that the computer is thinking, or rather, it is the smallest amount of what you can consider thought, if that. It's taking from a huge amount of data, and Brendan said that what the image generation things do, it's kind of being inspired by something. I would say it's more like it's just combining small portions of pictures and different things in the way that you ask it to. The way that Stable Diffusion works is that images are input or collected in big data files, and each image has to have a certain amount of tags. So if you want and you can influence the way that Stable Diffusion's models work by giving it another set of data with a certain amount of tags. So if you want your images to look like Wednesday Addams, then you have to give it a bunch of images of Wednesday Addams and give it tags that correspond with Wednesday Addams: black dress, pigtails, goth makeup, things like that. And using those, it is able to with language piece together. It's kind of like a collage more than anything. It's a really fancy collage. So it's not really thinking, you know. So generative AI is not really AI as we used to understand AI to be. Maybe in a couple decades later in the future, generative AI may evolve into a more general understanding of AI that we used to have. But right now, it's not it. And it's definitely exploited by marketing, and it's definitely exploited by companies that literally they slap AI onto everything. We were laughing the other day about the AI powered mouse that Logitech is offering. And I asked, like, what's so AI about this mouse? How can a mouse be AI powered? And I think, Brendan, you said that there's a button on the mouse that launches an AI prompt creator or something like that.
Yeah.
That's not an AI powered mouse. That's a lie. It's a blatant lie. And I'm not I'm not here to like, rag on Logitech. They do their products, it's whatever, and it's not like they're doing anything that no one else is doing either.
Yeah.
This is just the nature of the beast. Everyone has to have an AI product out. Everything has to be AI now because people are buying the AI things.
Yeah.
The market isn't doing this because it's being weird. There's clearly a demand for AI. I mean, look what's going on with Nvidia and stuff.
Yeah.
There's clearly something around AI, and it's making a lot of money. So why not just put it everywhere?
Yeah, I think that to your point about everybody just slapping AI on, earlier this year at CES, I saw so many manufacturers say that they have, oh, we've got the world's first AI computer. And all it was the fact that it had maybe an AI button where it would launch Copilot, or it was literally just running Windows with Copilot. Now, Microsoft has just introduced Copilot Plus, which has AI features, as it were. But even there, it's just leveraging an NPU. It's still accessing a cloud service. So it's really just an edge solution for AI. It's not really running AI on the computer. And even that solution has now been delayed because of security concerns around the fact that AI is constantly recording everything you're doing, just in case one day, maybe potentially in the future, you want to see the website that had yellow umbrellas on it and you can't remember the name of the website. So, like, I think that there's this push quickly, as both of you have said, to slap AI on every product that it can be slapped on. But it's all just marketing at the end of the day. It's not it's not something that's like has a tangible benefit for the end user. Now, if you say to me, okay, well, this coffee maker has AI, and the AI is implemented in such a way that what it does is it monitors how when you make coffee at what time, and after 3 or so weeks of learning what you're doing, you'll have a perfect cup of coffee every time you want one because the AI will learn your habits. Now, there I can sort of understand, like,
Right.
that's a useful implementation of it. But we are so far off that happening. Um, it's just not going to happen because on-device AI is still something that is hugely out of reach because of the sheer amount of compute power that it requires. And that compute power has led to NVIDIA now being the most valuable company in the world. And all that company makes is graphics cards. Yes, they make graphics cards for servers and for personal computers, but that doesn't really, at the end of the day, they make processors. That's it. And they are the most valuable company in the world, surpassing Microsoft and Apple, which both make other stuff. So, like you both say, there is something to this, but I think that something is the compute power that's required. And I don't know if we're ever going to reach a stage where I'm going to be running a large language model off of my phone. I don't see that happening just because how do you store all of that data? Maybe middle out to reference Silicon Valley once again.
Mm. And I think for enough people, the fact that, like, with Apple Intelligence, you can get AI, generative AI. That's real generative AI because it's ChatGPT. They
Yeah.
combine Siri with ChatGPT. It's OpenAI stuff. That's real generative AI from the people that made generative AI famous. But it's not on device AI. And I guess for enough people, the fact that it's cloud based and the fact that you need an internet connection to use it, and the fact that the internet is ubiquitous, it might as well be. But it's not. It's not the same. You can't call it an AI phone. It's not. You
Yeah.
can't call it an AI computer when it's not. But I guess that's
We
just what's
saw
happening.
those. We saw those two gadgets, the Rabbit R1 and the Human AI Pin, when those were released in the US, and they got absolutely lambasted by reviewers
Yeah.
because none of the stuff that was promised works because it can't work. All it
Yeah.
is it's kind of calling whatever large language model it needs to, but the actual interface and the speed at which it's able to do so is so poor that it is a terrible user experience. So yeah, we are so far away from on-device AI. I think it will surprise the general consumer just how far away we are.
Yeah. So, okay. Tangent done. Thank you for bearing with us. But I now want to move to AI and job security, because I think that's it, that's a major concern for a lot of people. When ChatGPT started rising in prominence and more people started to play with ChatGPT and other tools, there were fears that companies were going to start replacing workers. In fact, there were some companies that said that they were going to be replacing workers outright. We have seen companies now in 2024 replacing workers with AI solutions. So we asked people if their role has been impacted by AI. 44.7% said no. 44% said yes. Their role has been impacted, and 55% said no. So basically an even split there. And I think that, once again, to your point, Robin, that you mentioned earlier, I think this comes down to cost. And the cost of AI, I think, makes a lot of businesses, especially looking at the spread of professions that the respondents are based in. I think that kind of points, once again, to your point that maybe it's just a bit too expensive to replace workers with AI. What do you think about that question and the answers?
I'm not too sure if it will be overly expensive down the line. I think because a lot of the generative AI tools at the moment are not only free but are kind of siloed within existing software, that cost isn't necessarily going to be a big burden. I think you'll start seeing the costs around that when companies are with their digital transformation plans, embedding AI as a core part of that, and the compute that's required from that perspective. So I think from a worker perspective, I think companies will be quite happy for them to absorb the cost via whatever piece of hardware they're using. But if we're talking from a larger business enterprise perspective around the data that they're going to be using and trying to leverage AI to kind of extract value out of that, that's probably where that cost will start coming into play. But I guess more to your question around whether or not their roles will be impacted by AI, I think, again, it's a lot of wait and see what happens, because I think businesses locally anyway have to gauge where best to implement AI, and then where the cuts and cost savings can be made, because ultimately we live in a capitalist society. If jobs can be cut and productivity kept at the same level or even increased, it will be done. I was at a AI-focused media event last week, and we were discussing AI as far as jobs are concerned, and took the mining sector as an example. And a fair point was made around the fact that human beings probably shouldn't be working in mines. So for AI to be implemented there makes sense. However, a counterpoint was made around the fact that, sure, human beings shouldn't be working in mines, but human beings do work in mines. Human beings, especially in South Africa, are dependent on working in mines in order to help their families and support their families. To try to reskill or upskill them or kind of shift their positions within the company just doesn't make sense. There's probably only a handful of mine workers that are able to kind of make that shift, and unfortunately the rest are going to be left to the wayside. And unfortunately, I wouldn't be surprised, and don't quote me on this, but I wouldn't be surprised if a radical shift or implementation of AI within the mining sector leads to far more illegal mining happening. And we've seen so many stories about Zamazamas kind of resulting in deaths because they're working in mines that no one knows about, or they are working in conditions that aren't being properly regulated. So, I think AI will definitely have an impact on South Africa's business sector. I think it'll be a matter of it's just rather to see what's going to happen over the next couple of years as to where it's going to kind of find its feet.
Louis?
So the thing is, something like, AI, the thing is, there are certain, like automation and machine learning and stuff like that which are kind of still under the AI umbrella, not necessarily generative AI, but it kind of depends on what kind of AI you're talking about. For the thing like mining and stuff, I doubt a lot of generative AI will be using that because that's more about, it's more about text-based stuff. But automation and stuff like that could definitely be included in mine work in a lot of ways. And the problem is that it really does make things more efficient. There's lots of costs that you save by implementing these kinds of solutions. These massive automation and efficiency solutions. And the companies will look into these things if they really need to save money on certain things, or this kind of it's kind of not something that anyone can really stop. It's kind of just the way that the future of work is looking right now. So the International Monetary Fund, they released a blog post at the beginning of the year, and they said that they're foreseeing that a wide range of jobs across the globe will be affected in some way, like we have in the survey, impacted. But they use the word impacted by AI. So this doesn't necessarily mean that people are going to lose their jobs. It means that some jobs will benefit from AI integration. Some employees will become more productive. Some will, they'll be able to do work faster. They'll be able to do better work, and that's an impact of the AI. But they also say for the other half of the people who are impacted by AI, they'll find that AI applications will execute tasks that they are doing, and they'll do it better. What this does is it lowers the demand for labor, right? So this leads to lower wages and reduced hiring. In the most extreme cases, some of these jobs may simply disappear. So what this means is that eventually, or maybe not eventually, but there is a chance that certain jobs, the ones that aren't positively impacted, will be negatively impacted by the AI replacing people in certain ways. And an example of this I can give is if you are in, for example, if you're a journalist or not a journalist, a content writer, a copywriter.
Yeah.
You write copy for a company that they do advertising or whatever. You're a copywriter, and you work for a team of 5, right?
Yeah.
All of a sudden, your boss comes through and he says, "I got a subscription to ChatGPT. We have ChatGPT Plus now, and we can do all these kind of cool things with ChatGPT." And eventually, the workload of the 5 writers now doesn't double, but it quadruples, right? And you're just putting out all this work. The boss can say, "Actually, we're doing all this work now. What if I cut down the team by 3?
Yeah.
What if I don't need to hire? I was gonna hire 2 more writers. Now I don't need to. So that's 2 writers that aren't getting work, or 3 writers that are gonna be fired because, simply put, there's no need for them anymore." An example, a prime example, in the local context, about how this thing actually does affect jobs. So I got a press release from Eduvos. They're like a digital educator. They do tertiary education. They do a lot of digital stuff, coding and technology-based courses and stuff. They have 12 campuses in South Africa, and they earlier in the beginning of the year, before they did their registration process, they decided to get Microsoft to come and do automation for them, to see if they can automate this whole system. They got Microsoft 365 to kind of revamp how they do registrations, to basically do a whole digital transformation on their whole system. And in the press release, they say that what used to be a 90-day process to kind of register all the people, they've managed to get all that process down to just under an hour. What used to be 80-page applications per student, now they don't need to do those 80-page applications anymore. But one of the points that in the whole thing that kind of like struck me was that usually, because of this long and tedious process, to make it quicker, Eduvos would hire 120 local people on temporary contracts to work the 90 days, right? They would pay them for those 90 days to help them with the registration process. Because it was very tedious, it was time consuming, it was difficult. Now, with the Microsoft automation, they don't need to do that anymore. And they say they don't need to do that. We used to hire those people and we don't need to do that anymore. So those, and those aren't permanent contracts, but those are 120 people that would have gotten some money for those 90 days. Now they're not necessary anymore. So they don't have anything to do. And that's just like a small real life example of how these things can affect jobs, and they do affect jobs in the South African context.
Yeah.
This isn't a thing that's going to happen in the future. I honestly believe this is a thing that's happening now in lots of small ways all over the country.
I mean, I think that also extends further to like call centers, right? We're seeing a lot more companies leveraging chatbots, and you only get to speak to a human when things are like really serious. So like, and call centers were manned by a lot of people who possibly didn't have a qualification or a very high education, and now those jobs are just gone. And I mean, that's not to say that that's the only people who were in call centers. I'm sure there were some very skilled people who were in call centers who couldn't find employment elsewhere. But I mean, it's just the state of things is that jobs that folks could leverage to at least pay rent and put food in their mouths are just disappearing because, well, there's an AI solution. It's easier to just hand things off to an AI. It's sad times actually. Just thinking about how, in the pursuit of advancement and advanced technology, we're kind of just leaving humanity to the wayside. And there's a tweet that comes up on my feed quite often where somebody's like, well, I was hoping that AI would do things like the taxes and all that other stuff and earn money for me so that I could focus on doing art and writing books while AI is writing the books and doing art, and I'm still stuck doing my taxes and stuff. And yeah, I think contrary to what our readers say, I am very disillusioned by the state of artificial intelligence at the moment. Okay, so we mentioned upskilling, Robin. I think you mentioned it, and you made a good point that when it comes to upskilling, folks, not everybody's going to either want to or be capable of learning how to do AI prompts or filter for AI and edit AI stuff. And in our survey, our respondents, 61% said that their business is assisting them to upskill when it comes to AI, and only 38% aren't doing that. And I'm interested to hear what your thoughts are on that. Louis, what do you think of that?
I really don't think, just from what I understand about the South African companies and stuff, I don't think that any upskilling that's happening right now is very intensive. I think maybe they're having some talks, they're having some meetings. They might have a guy come in here and there. I doubt they're letting their employees, or too many of their employees. There might be a small portion that said yes, that are from companies that are like serious about AI, and they're saying we need you to go get this certificate on prompting and stuff like that. That's what I think. Honestly, I don't think any of the people who are getting upskilled in terms of AI are doing anything too intensive, especially because a majority of them, when we get to the end of the survey, they say that they mostly use ChatGPT as their preferred AI software of choice. Maybe I think it's you guys might disagree with me, but I think it's quite surface level at the moment.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I think when it comes to upskilling, I think it may just boil down to Jeff, who knows AI very well, comes in on a Monday morning after the meeting and says, well, here's how to get the best response from ChatGPT. I don't know. What do you think, Robin?
Share both of your sentiments around this. If I look at one of the other questions we asked around what AI-related skills employees are employers are advising their workers to learn,
Yeah.
a lot of the answers are a specific generative AI platform. I'm seeing a lot of chat GPTs, I'm seeing a lot of Geminis in there as well. So I think when it comes to upskilling, or rather what employers think will be important skills to have, it's very much just make yourself au fait with a specific generative AI platform, and then we'll take it from there. So again, I think, like you guys mentioned, those conversations are quite superficial at the moment. It's more of like a by the by kind of thing, and it will be interesting how, even if that develops, or it's more mature over time. Because again, I think, like we mentioned a few times already, a lot of companies don't know what they want to do with AI. They just know that AI has to feature somewhere. And instead of investing in or taking the time to upskill employees, they're just kind of saying, oh, there are generative AI platforms, get familiar with one or two of them, and then we'll take it from there. It's up to the employees, the workforce, to come up with ways to leverage those platforms, and it doesn't seem like a lot of business owners are taking the onus as far as seeing what there is from that perspective.
Yeah, I see some of these responses. People say like data analytics, planning and marketing, reporting, image recognition. So like it's very varied, but I think it's very specific to the business that is using it. So like if you're a plumber, I don't see you really using AI, although I suppose maybe you might use it to do your invoicing for you or something to that effect. And I think that a lot of companies kind of interact with AI indirectly. So, like for instance, we use Slack here at Hypertext, and Slack just recently introduced a whole slew of AI features for a premium, of course. But I mean, you could access it that way, or if you're using Microsoft Word that has Copilot integration, you're accessing it in that way. So, I think that a lot of times it may just come off as training within certain things. Or if you in software development, I'm sure that there are ways that your company is saying, hey, look at AI and maybe use it in this sort of context, etc., etc. So yeah, it's all very surface level. I don't think it's stuff like, oh well, here's how to build your own LLM. That would be awesome, but I don't think anybody is teaching that in between meetings at a company. That's just me.
I also think companies don't want people to do that. They want AI to build the LLMs for them.
Yeah.
So I think AI is, again, these companies don't really necessarily know what they want to get from AI. And I think also the startups, the AI startups that are kind of delivering these platforms, they're also a bit, I don't want to say lost, but they are just kind of throwing everything out there and seeing what sticks. We've kind of seen the pace at which OpenAI has released new tools and new services and new offerings. And it's weird because, and we had this discussion on previous podcasts, but how the speed at which these solutions are being rolled out and how slowly regulators or whatever bodies are in charge of kind of controlling these new pieces of software, like how slowly they are moving. It's really baffling at the moment, at least from my perspective.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of people putting the cart before the horse when it comes to AI, and once regulation steps in, I think that's going to be a reckoning, a day of reckoning for a lot of businesses. Okay, so to round off then in terms of the survey, the final question we asked is, do you believe your industry will be fully disrupted by AI within the next 5 to 10 years? And 60%, the overwhelming majority, said yes, 22% said no, and 16% said not sure. I think that's kind of indicative of what we've been saying, is that AI has the potential to disrupt a lot of industries. And I think that the next 5 to 10 years, absolutely. I think that this figure kind of reflects a bit of truth. I think a lot of industries are going to be impacted by this, whether it's in terms of job losses or in terms of enhancing jobs or enhancing services. The IMF report that you mentioned earlier, Louis, where some jobs just become obsolete. I think that this is by far the response that I sort of had in my mind. It's close to that response as possible. Um, yeah, I think that especially like here where we work, I think that in terms of media and journalism, I think AI is going to be a disruptive force. I don't think that in a good way though. I don't see it replacing reporters and journalists and that sort of stuff, but I do think that the whole media industry will be disrupted. I think that right now, like a lot of people, myself included, look down on people using AI to generate art. But I think that maybe one day AI header images are a bit more normalized. Maybe creating a video in a couple of minutes that would have usually taken a person a whole day to do, like just to for a short news story or for some content or something like that. I think like that sort of stuff is where AI may disrupt the media industry. I'm just thinking of myself here. Um, but yeah, I think that the 60%, I think that's within the realm of possibility. What do you think, Robin?
So, kind of looking at the media industry, I think that AI will have or already is having a disruptive effect. If I actually reflect on this question, might have actually refined it and said the next 2 to 5 years instead of 5 to 10, because I think that's actually how quickly things are moving. But as far as how I think AI will disrupt the media industry, I think a lot of it will depend on how effectively these generative AI platforms are able to tackle things like hallucinations and data voids.
Mm.
At the moment, we have a good chuckle in the office every now and then about something silly that a generative AI platform has suggested based on a search or a prompt. But the moment those kind of elements are ironed out and kind of sorted, I think we could, and I mean, we are seeing websites that are spun up and purely filled with AI generated content.
Mm.
I wouldn't be surprised in the next 2 to 5 years if we see more AI generated newsrooms pop up. I know there's been some backlash around that. I know Sports Illustrated shut down because they perhaps moved too quickly on this front.
Mm.
We saw CNET got a lot of backlash over its AI generated content. But I think the moment that AI gets less error free, the more quote unquote trusted it will become.
Mm.
And that's one of the tenets that that media, especially publishing houses, have always had is trust. They've been able to know that what they are putting out there, depending on which side of the political spectrum they lean, whatever they're putting out there can be trusted. AI still has an issue in that regard, but once it's sorted out, the media industry is going to have something to reckon with.
Yeah, Louis, your thoughts?
I think the last question on the response to it, I think we've been saying that it's likely that we're in South Africa right now. It's kind of like a casual understanding of AI. I think people still understand that it's a big deal. You know what I mean? People
Yeah.
still understand that it has the potential to do a lot of change. Which is why most of them said yes. They believe that the industry will be fully disrupted by AI within the next within the next 5 to 10 years. I think is important here because they think that it's not happening right now, but in the future, AI has the potential to change a lot of things, and I think that's kind of the way they understand it. And I agree with that too. With what Robin said and what you said, Brendan. Yes, there's definitely a lot of changes going to happen in the next few years with the AI. And one of the things the IMF says in the report is that what countries, the governments of countries need to do, and they need to do very quickly, sooner instead of later, is put in legislation that will protect jobs, put in legislation that companies need to do certain things, because the consequences could be huge. To the private sector. There needs to be some form of legislation put in place that certain positions can't be taken by AI, or rather, that AI cannot be used. If you are using AI, maybe I don't know. Especially in South Africa, that so much of the labor market is I mean, not every country has labor courts,
Mm.
not every country has massive trade unions or coalitions of trade unions like COSATU and stuff like that. I imagine when these things start becoming more apparent in South Africa, there's going to be a huge pushback from the government and a huge pushback from trade unions that are going to go against AI. But right now, the reason I don't think we're seeing any of that is because, like we've been saying, it's still super early, super early in this whole thing. So yeah, maybe in the next 5 to 10 years, who knows how big the pushback is going to be. But as soon as people start losing jobs in enough consistency, there's going to be a pushback, I think. And yeah, that'll be interesting to see how it goes.
Yeah, I think to wrap up, I do want to mention something that's kind of been mentioned a few times already in this podcast, and that is the law. We've mentioned now multiple times that lawmakers have been incredibly slow to deal with this, particularly in South Africa, and that's problematic because right now people are at risk of losing their jobs. Right now, AI is being trained on potentially sensitive data from customers without their permission or knowledge. So there's a real threat that's happening right now, and it's not sometime in the future. Um, as Robin said, rethinking the final question that we mentioned, the next 2 to 5 years is more apt because that's kind of the timeline of things. And we've seen similar feet dragging when it came to cryptocurrency, right? The cryptocurrency market was awash with scams and fraud and all that sort of stuff. And it took governments literal years to realize that, hey, maybe we need to introduce some stuff here. And for the most part, it's still a wild west when it comes to cryptocurrency. There's still pump and dumps happening and cryptocurrency scams, theft of cryptocurrency, and no source of kind of pushback from people who are robbed, consequences for people who do the robbing. All of these are questions that should have been answered years ago, and we're still battling with them today. And my fear is that the same thing is going to happen with AI, where it's become so complex that developing any sort of legislation around it becomes near impossible. We've seen the likes of OpenAI already say things like, well, if we can't infringe on copyrights, then we don't really have a business, and that's not fair. What's to say that when the lawmakers come knocking, they're like, well, if we had to follow the law, we wouldn't have a business. So, just allow us to keep breaking the law. And I think that's where this whole sector has a massive asterisk next to it for me, because right now we're operating in a wild west. We don't know what's happening. AI could be sued into the ground by multiple lawsuits that are on the go for suspected and alleged copyright infringement. The whole thing could come undone because there are really only a handful of companies that are driving the sector forward. And if they get shuttered because they are bankrupt, the whole industry comes undone, which is where I kind of, in my mind, initially when the stuff started popping off, I was like, this reminds me a lot of the metaverse and Web3 nonsense that was happening not even 2 years ago, like last year. And now there's a new bell of the ball. And I want to gauge from you guys, what do you think happens when lawmakers eventually catch up? Are they even able to catch up? Robin?
They are not able to catch up. I think that it will depend on regions. I know that the EU has been a lot more proactive in this regard, but even they are moving quite slowly. And we have to also keep in mind the fact that a lot of these AI startups are American companies. And as we know, American companies, just like the American government, can do as it wishes. If I take the region like Africa, that's even further behind, especially to try and collate all the different governments and get them on the same page as far as a unified kind of law structure or regulation around the use of AI. I don't see it ever really panning out. And we also have to keep in mind that South Africa has a really poor track record as far as enforcing regulation. Part Poppy is a great example. Poppy. It literally has no teeth. I think we've seen one small fine being dished out to date,
Mm-hmm.
and still there are still data privacy concerns. There are hacks and breaches happening every single day, and seemingly nothing is being done about it. At least that the public is being made aware of. So, yeah. To your question, the short answer is no.
Louis?
The thing is, and I think you touched on it, Brendan. The thing is that it's difficult to understand, and it's difficult to like write up laws for something you don't understand.
Yeah.
You need to get experts in. You need to get people looking at these things, and I think that's why it takes so long to put any legislation towards AI, because it's difficult to understand exactly what AI is. I mean, this whole conversation we've been having is about how AI is actually a lot of different things and it affects a lot of different things, and those complexities make it difficult to write laws, which have to be very specific. You
Yeah.
know, the point of laws is that they have to be very specific. And, you know, if you read any legal documents, before anything, there's a preamble about what certain statements and words and phrases actually mean. Because everyone should understand when you read a legal document of what the law is trying to say. And because of that is why I think South Africa in particular, we're so far behind just AI already. Um, in generally speaking, as a populace, that's why it will take even longer for legislation to come into effect. And that's kind of where we're leaving it, I guess. Or at least where I'm leaving it, I guess. Where it's just it's going to take long because people need to understand these things, and they're difficult to understand. Even now, I'll admit that I kind of understand how generative AI works. I have a very basic understanding of it. A lot of the stuff still escapes me. Other than like machine learning, automation, those are big phrases that mean a lot of different things.
Mm.
Um, and like I said, to write laws, you have to be very specific on a lot of certain things. And that's why I think, yeah, it's just gonna take very, very long time. Yeah.
Yeah, and not to be mean to older people, but most people in government tend to be older and not very tech literate. And like you mentioned, Louis, this stuff is very complicated. It's very complex, and yeah, it slows down legislative processes massively.
I mean, it's still. I just want to add one last thing,
Yeah.
Brandon. I mean, and this is something you know very well about. I mean, the government is still talking about 4IR,
Yeah.
and it's still using that buzzword, and it's still talking about all those things. And honestly, we know from things we read about, and they don't really understand those things they're talking about. We're launching a 4IR academy. What are you guys gonna teach the kids? We're gonna teach them VR and AR. What do you mean you're gonna teach them VR and AR? No, there's headsets there, and what do you mean we're gonna teach them that? What are you gonna teach them?
Yeah.
There's a lot of misunderstandings, and it's like the government in South Africa in particular loves to bandy around technology for technology's sake, and that's not going to help us, when the AI comes for our jobs. I don't think.
Yeah. Well, that's our episode on AI and responses to our AI and Business South Africa survey. Let us know your thoughts. We're over on all the major social medias. We're on X, formerly Twitter, and Facebook. So let us know what your thoughts are around AI. If you didn't manage to record a response, yeah, we're going to try and make these a bit more regular, gauge our readers and South Africa as a whole on matters of technology. So maybe let us know what else you'd like to hear South Africa's opinions on. Maybe we can craft a survey around that as well. But from myself, Brendan Lotz, for this episode of Geeks Love Lists, cheerio from Robin Lee Chetty.
Well, take care, everyone.
And from Louis Monzon,
Bye, guys.
we'll see you next time.